Good afternoon, everyone. It's Jeff Sponcia once again, Milwaukee County in the Department of Transportation, the Director's Office. And this is our third and potentially final Complete Communities um, webinar, that's really meant for all of you. Um, This webinar itself will be focused on how to fund Vision Zero, and all the things we can do to make our streets even safer. And so we have a couple experts who will be walking us through those opportunities to fund all of our projects. We really want to thank, before we start here, our project team members at Tool Design. Just want to list them here. First, Tarek and Sazia, but definitely both Sean and Angie, who will be our presenters. They put this presentation together, just based on their expertise. So, they're a great resource for all of us. We are recording this. You'll receive a link in the coming days, and we'll make the slides available afterwards as well. And we even have just a two-pager as a summary, that we'll send out as well. But yeah, throw your name, organization, position in the chat, just so we know who all is here. So once again, I want to thank all of you, and I will hand it off to Angie.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. Hi, everybody. My name is Angie Byrne. I have been at Tool Design a whopping 7 months now. Prior to that, I came from the USDOT, where I worked first for many years with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Then I worked on motor carrier safety issues. But then I did probably what some of you have met me through before doing. I was one of the main people to operationalize the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program. I'll let Sean introduce himself when I turn it over to him, but just kind of want to give you all a little rundown of what we're going to cover today. So I'm going to start out by just sharing some just overall general tips about pursuing funding, particularly federal funding. Then I'm going to turn things over to Sean, who's going to cover local municipal funds and state of Wisconsin funds. And then Sean and I are going to mix things up a little bit. He's going to cover some federal and other grants, and I'm going to cover the rest of it. And then we'll jump in with some Q&A and just conversation. We'll love to hear from you. So as we're talking today, definitely kind of take note of some things you're thinking of and want to discuss at the end. We left a lot of time for discussion today. All right, so overall tips. So I'm going to focus on we're focusing on safety programs today because that's why we're all here. That's what we're interested in. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that we often kind of think about when we're addressing safety problems in our communities is kind of taking sort of an all or nothing approach to safety. We hold off on doing. We always look to do the really big things, the things that get ribbon cuttings for the politicians, stuff that we send out press releases about. But really, some of the best things you can do for safety is just the mundane stuff. Don't be afraid to be iterative with your safety projects. So, start off with doing things with speed humps, centerline hardening, widening your edge lines, things like that. Routine paving and maintenance is a huge opportunity area and often overlooked when we're talking about doing safety work. And these are all great things you can do at low cost. And the key thing is systematically throughout your network. We can all name the 5 or 6 huge problem areas in our community. But if as we transition to a safe system approach and really start moving to doing things more systemically, really taking those opportunities to focus on like doing the mundane stuff. And a good opportunity to do those iterative things is quick builds. Like I love quick builds. Like I could go on a rant about how much I love flex posts, but I won't bore you all today with that. But I love them because they're such a low risk way to test out new strategies and build support for change. They're low cost. You can do things at a systematic scale. And the great things I think we forget about when we're talking about quick builds is they set you up really well for funding in the future because you're showing, look, we did this. We got these kind of outcomes when we did it. We want to make it permanent now. You have a great argument you're making in grant applications. So quick builds holds that power too. All right. So one thing that I love to keep in mind when we're talking about grant programs is there's different emphasis of different types of grant programs. For example, the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program is all about systemic projects. Very rarely are the awards in Safe Streets made for a big thing like a roundabout or a intersection improvement. Usually it tends to be a lot of lower cost measures spread throughout the network. So it's doing, 20 curb extensions throughout the network, applying retroreflective backplate covers to all the stoplights in the network, things like that. It's much more about doing things at scale than like that, those couple big project areas. And so then there's the more reactive things. So for those like, hey, we know this is a big problem, needs a lot of money to fix it. Build is a great grant program for that. So think about the grant program type, and we'll get into this a little more later. If those more proactive, systemic focuses of grant programs, and then the more reactive things. There's funding sources for both, so targeting your funding for the appropriate type. Um, I'm going to, in HSIP, the Highway Safety Improvement, those tend to have a combination. So HSIP tends to be a little proactive and a little reactive. I'm going to jump out of here just for a quick second and demonstrate a website for y'all that I think is a great resource. And this is the DOT Navigator. This is your one-stop shop for all federal grant opportunities within the US DOT. The very minimum thing I think everybody should do here is sign up for grant resources, okay? This is the most basic thing everybody can do. So if you go to the search grants here, and then go to this DOT competitive grants dashboard. First of all, there's a giant list of anything you could be doing. So you can sort, you can slice, you can dice. But a big thing way, way, way down here at the bottom of the page is you can sign up. Where'd it go? It was here. My bad. It was here this morning because I double checked it, but you can sign up for grant opportunities, and I highly, highly recommend doing that. So definitely, oh, here it is, stay connected. My bad. It's right here on the homepage. Stay connected. So definitely subscribe to grant opportunities. Then you can search for grants that I just showed you. And then the third thing I want to just talk about quickly is the resources down here at the bottom of this page. Like federal grants are hard. And there's the funding and match resources are going to vary by each grant program. Sometimes they require a lot of data. Some of these bigger grant programs require benefit cost analysis. There are great resources available to help you out with that thing. So definitely check out the US DOT Navigator. All right, so I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here. All right. So federal funding. When you're seeking federal funding opportunities, know that there's strings attached. Federal funds are kind of a pain to operate with sometimes. So everything that touches federal funding requires NEPA. Now, for some of you who have got like federal grant awards to do a Safe Streets and Roads for All action plan, you're like, but I didn't do NEPA. Oh my gosh, did I make a mistake? A lot of times what federal highway will do in those cases is issue a blanket categorical exclusion. So And your Federal Highway Division office will help you decide if, hey, do I have to do an individual categorical exclusion for a plan, or if it is a blanket one is already done for you. So NEPA is actually required for everything federal. Federal reporting also has higher reporting standards. So definitely think of that one. You're doing your budgets, you're thinking of your timeline. NEPA, it takes some time. So plan that in your timeline. If you think it's going to take 2 months, give yourself 4 months. Always give yourself some cushion time when you're thinking about federal grant programs, and your budget accordingly for taking longer to do things. A general rule of thumb I've heard from some people working with federal grants is they just add 20% to the cost of everything in a federal grant program. If you don't spend it, you can always give them, like, you can always get, most of these grants are reimbursement programs, so it doesn't hurt to build yourself a little wiggle room in your budgets. All right, match I'm going to cover quickly because it's probably one of the top questions I used to get asked. Most federal grant programs operate what's known as the uniform guidance. That is 2 CFR 200. And this, you can find out if your grant program falls under the uniform guidance just by reading that notice of funding opportunity. It will, if it has citations that say 2 CFR 200, well, then you know it operates under the uniform guidance. The best thing I love about the uniform guidance is that it does not require cash match. You can use in-kind match for that. So volunteer time can count. Different things can count. I give an analogy to people all the time. If it is eligible for the grant program, it is eligible for match. But what that means, what does that mean in practice? I love giving an apples analogy. So I'll use Safe Streets. You can match red apples to green apples, but you can't match apples to oranges. So with Safe Streets, there's a whole lot of things that is eligible for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program. So say you're doing some curb extensions. Okay, cool. You don't have to match that to another curb extension. You can match that to some data work that's being done by your police department. If it's not being used as match for another source of federal funds and it didn't originate as federal funds, that counts. So it's eligible for the grant program, red apples to green apples. So match can be different. It doesn't need to be one-to-one in match. And then the final takeaway with match is don't double dip. As I mentioned, you can't use match twice. You can't use it for multiple match programs. So just be mindful if you are using something for match, it's not being used as a source of match for others. And just some kind of final general takeaway tips is, follow the structure of the NOFO. And what I mean by that is, like, if it says outline your application this way, outline your application that way. Don't make people look for things. Big takeaway with that. Provide all the requested materials. What a lot of grant programs will do is actually give you a checklist to make sure you cover all the information that is required as part of the NOFO. Use that checklist and make sure you have all those required forms and that you sign all those required forms. I can't tell you how many times I've had to reach out to people because they submitted the form, but then they forgot to sign it. So check for those things too. Make sure your numbers are consistent. Check your math. I've had to fix a whole lot of work with people to fix a lot of applications over the years because they'll say they want this much in federal funds in one form, another form, they have a different amount of money. So just make sure your math adds up. And a good tip to make sure to do is avoid using cents. A lot of times, you'll get maybe from a contractor or something and it adds up and it's, $20,431.32. just round up. This is a grant application. It's not a reimbursement, so you don't need it to that granular level. So avoid using cents. And then my final kind of tip is don't go overboard with the supplemental materials. A lot of times the reviewers, to be perfectly candid, do not look at those materials. The reviewers can only look at what's required by the NOFO. And so if your supplemental materials is not something required by the NOFO, a lot of times the reviewers aren't going to look at it. They have a very defined amount of time that they have to review each application. They have to review only very specific things. So don't go overboard with your supplemental materials. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Sean.
Thanks, Angie. Uh, Everyone, I just wanted to first of all say thank you for putting your name and position in the chat window. That was really interesting for me to read. My name is Sean Murphy Lopez. I'm a principal planner with Tool Design, and my experience is partially in local government. So I worked for the city of Minneapolis in the Public Works Department for 8 years as the bicycle and pedestrian coordinator. So I did a lot of safety related traffic projects, including 4-to-3 conversions and bike lanes and sidewalks, crosswalks, things like that. 11 years ago, I moved to Wisconsin. I live in Richland County, which is a rural county in southwest Wisconsin. And for 6 years, I was on the County Board of Supervisors. I was elected to that, and I served on the Finance Committee. So I got really involved in local government budgeting here in Wisconsin for a rural county of 18,000 people. And when I moved to Wisconsin, I started working for Tool Design. So I've been doing that for 11 years now. And I've done a lot of safety related projects, including safe streets for all planning. So that's my background. It's a mix of urban and rural and public sector and private sector work. So I'm just going to give one caveat here first before I share my screen. I'm going to share a lot of ideas with you. Um, Jeff had mentioned that we summarized those ideas in a handout that he's going to send to folks. So I'll just give you a view of it right here because I'm going to share a PowerPoint with a lot more information than this. But we wanted you to just see a summary of what this information is going to look like. So Angie already mentioned this in the agenda for today, but I'm going to cover local funding sources, state of Wisconsin funding, and then federal grants that she already started getting into. So they're summarized here. I realize, I being part of a local government in Wisconsin, that there are, of course, a lot of demands on budgets. In no way are we saying you should use all of these for safety related funding. You should really pick and choose from these, what's going to work for your community or your client or wherever you're at the best. So pick and choose from the menu. You'll know some of these, I'm sure. I'm sure everyone will know some of these, but maybe not all. So we just put them all into one spot. And then we added examples. So you could see local communities in Milwaukee County, how are they using some of these? So we did that research so you could see that. So I'm going to go to the PowerPoint now. So with local funding, local municipal funding, there are four main types. And they're operating capital budget, tax increment financing, and then just a general category of existing transportation projects. So the first three are really parts of a budget, and the fourth one is a broader topic, really. So almost always this local funding is going to be coming from property taxes. So all of us who live here in Wisconsin, we get this sort of a property tax bill every year, and either the city or the village, or I don't think there's township people here, maybe there are, they get a slice of that property tax, and that can then go into these different four categories. So with the operating budget, some communities, you're going to have a budget document. Others, it's going to be just the official state of Wisconsin forms that you're going to be filling out. But when you think about the operating budget, there are four main categories that have to do with transportation safety. So the first is street system maintenance, and that can involve all sorts of things here. I won't read all these all these bullet points. But they're just different stages of street system maintenance where you can be talking either internally or with your partners or with the community about traffic safety projects. Parks and trails maintenance is another one. Parks and trails typically, they don't operate a lot of, sometimes they'll operate, roads, often not a lot, but especially a lot of trails and sidewalks. So lighting those trails, doing repair of trails, pavement markings, that really gets into the safety, the signs as well. Then engineering and planning, that can be a part of the operating budget. Um, your engineering and planning departments or specialists, depending upon what they're called in your community, they can handle all those sorts of things that are really safety related. And then finally, police and safety oftentimes they'll oftentimes have a line item in their budgets for crossing guards within their community, and then they'll actually carry out the traffic enforcement in their community as well. And that's obviously safety related. So as I already alluded to, departments and divisions, whether you're in a village of 5,000 people or a city of 400,000, they're going to have varying names. Sometimes there won't even be names, but you'll have someone who handles different topics that I just covered. And that responsibility for Vision Zero safety countermeasures, it's shared across all of all sorts of different people. The budgets typically include within the operating budget personnel, equipment, and supplies. And budget growth, of course, as many of you know, in Wisconsin, it's typically restricted by state levy limits. One just tip overall, I've worked for engineers, I've worked with a lot of clients and communities. It's always important first to recognize that existing work is already taking place with safety. No community is starting from scratch. They're already doing things to affect this. And you'll of course want to make change and improvements and culture focus, policies and priorities, but make sure to recognize those existing efforts first and seek those out and learn about them. And I'm sure a lot of you already know about those in your communities. So an example here of a local community in Wauwatosa, their operating budget has 12% carved out for public works. And there's of course a piece of that for police and safety that has a role here as well. But within the public works budget, I just highlighted they have all of their staff members listed out in the Wauwatosa budget. So you've got 24 city employees in the engineering department, you've got 64 in the public works department, and then you have traffic, electrical maintenance, so basically stoplights and other issues I'm sure related to street lights. They've got 6 employees. So all of those people are going to have a role in transportation safety. Here's another example of a much smaller community. So the Village of River Hills, they've got a street maintenance section in their budget, and they don't put the number of staff, they just put the amount that they're spending. So obviously they have salaries and all the benefits that go along with those, but then they have supplies. So things like street signs, that's going to be very closely related. Road repair, there are a lot of opportunities for transportation safety in those. So when you're thinking about where could some of this money come from, sometimes it can come from a local existing operating budget. Then, of course, most communities, or a lot of them, not all of them, but the vast majority have a capital budget. And in a capital budget, the transportation safety related items that can be paid for include this entire list right here. So it varies a lot. You can have different call outs in capital budgets. Sometimes these things are happening wrapped in as part of other projects, and they won't always be called out in a capital budget. And we'll go over some examples of those. But these are typically the ways transportation safety or the types of transportation safety items that get funded by capital budgets. Capital budgets, they're not always just those local property taxes. They oftentimes include those outside funds that are coming from, say, a federal grant or a state of Wisconsin grant. Local funds, though, when the capital budget does involve local funds, they often come from bonds, and that's borrowing. But that's not always true because sometimes, especially some smaller communities, they'll create a general fund or an operating budget category called capital outlay. And it's basically like every year they set aside so much money to go towards something in their capital budget. So sometimes some capital money doesn't have to be borrowed. It can actually come from those annual property taxes. Municipalities may borrow up to 5% of their assessed value, so all the improvements in your community, all the buildings, 5% of that can be borrowed. So communities can go up to that amount, and that's in the Wisconsin State Constitution. Bonding is an exception to state imposed levy limits. So you can go, you don't have to follow those levy limits if you are borrowing the money. And then borrowing can be short term. Specifically, it can be less than a year, or it can be a longer term note, say 10 years. So a local example of this is the city of West Allis. They have a lot of street reconstruction projects. Some of these you can even see here, they call out certain safety improvements. So there's pedestrian safety on National Avenue on one of those lines, and there's an image showing what the city of West Allis has done. A third form of local funding for safety projects that's probably less commonly used, but it's still definitely a possibility, are tax increment districts. These allow a municipality to fund infrastructure through property tax on newly developed property. So this chart, which comes from the state of Wisconsin, you'll probably need this PowerPoint afterward if you want to learn more about TIDs and really study this chart. But what happens is when a tax increment district is created in a community for a certain geography within that community, over like say a 30-year period, the county, the school, the tech college, and the municipality, they get that base tax that is at the time when the TID is created. So if the TID's created in 2025, whatever property taxes they're getting in 2025, they get all the way through 2055 over a 30-year period. And whatever property taxes grow in that time, that goes into the TID account. And how this is related to safety is that a plan has to be written for each TID. And for you to spend any of that TID money on safety focused transportation projects, you've got to have those in your TID plan. They have to be written into it. State law allows them to be used within a half mile of a TID boundary. And a plan must be approved by a joint review board. And a joint review board is made up of not just the municipality, I believe, but also the other stakeholders, like, say, the county and the school. So a local example of this is the village of Shorewood. If you look at this map on the lower left, they have several tax increment districts. The boundaries are outlined here. This particular one, I grabbed the screenshot in the upper right-hand corner of TID District number 5 in Shorewood. And they actually do call out several transportation safety related projects. So over this period when they have this TID, they can take any of that money and they can do things like, say, install a traffic signal, or they can put in bike lanes or sidewalks or street lighting, all transportation safety related items. And then finally, the last category, I kind of mentioned this is a broader category. It can go in any of those that I mentioned earlier, the operating capital budget or the TIDs. Transportation projects where local municipalities spend money, they can be led by that local municipality, or they can be led by the county, a developer, the state of Wisconsin, WisDOT. And the types of projects that can happen with transportation projects, they get called all sorts of things. And I've listed some of those in the bullets here. The point is, when you're looking for ways to fund some of this stuff, a good way to do it is through existing transportation projects that are already happening because of, say, a need for pavement to be refurbished. So a local example of this is the village of Fox Point. They put some local money into a WisDOT project. They have a state highway that goes through their community. Locally, they call it Lake Drive. And they worked with the DOT because they wanted several crosswalks of Lake Drive installed. So the DOT is picking up most of the cost of the road work. This is highlighted in red here in the red box. But the DOT has required the city, if they want the crosswalks, to pay for that. So the city in their budget, on the very bottom of this slide, this is just a little screenshot from their budget. They have $40,000 from their Department of Public Works going to put those crosswalks in. So it's an example of local funding on an existing transportation project. So next I'm going to talk about state of Wisconsin funding. There are four types here. The state of Wisconsin, has a budget. On the right-hand side, you can see the portion of it that goes to transportation. There are four types of um, funding that comes from this bucket of money that comes from the state for transportation. So for connecting highway aids, not every community in Milwaukee County gets these. Um, Connecting highway aids, there are all sorts of state and U.S. highways going through any location, including Milwaukee County. WisDOT has jurisdiction and handles construction on all of those, but maintenance, while it's paid for by WisDOT, is handled by others. So between most cities or villages, that's handled by the county in Wisconsin. Of course, not by WisDOT. For those who are familiar with how the DOT works in Wisconsin, they don't do the maintenance work themselves. They hand it off to locals. But there are some connecting highways that where the cities or the villages get connecting highway aids within certain cities or villages. So in Milwaukee County, these are the list of communities that get those connecting highway aids. And the important connection here to transportation safety is that these funds can be used for maintenance and traffic control within these communities along these stretches of highways. So, for example, if a new crosswalk or a signal needs to be put up or maintained or something like that, probably more on the maintenance side, these funds can be used for that work. And of course, there'll be other demands on these funds too, but this is just a potential source. WisDOT funding. So WisDOT, of course, comes through and they construct those highways or reconstruct them. And this is an example in the city of Glendale, where I've highlighted in red boxes the things on the project website for WisDOT that are transportation safety related items. WisDOT is, in this case, they're paying for shared use path and filling of sidewalk gaps. And that's that bottom red text right there. So sometimes the state will step in and pay for some of those items. Here's another example from the village of Hales Corners. There's a sidewalk that's needed where that red line is drawn in that image. And it's unclear if WisDOT's giving funding, but this is another example in a local community. Another category for state of Wisconsin funding are general transportation aids for local roads. So unlike connecting highway aids, general transportation aids come to every community across the state, every city, village, township, and county. And so for all of the cities and villages in Milwaukee County, these are the amounts that each community gets. It's based on a 6-year average of what each community is spending. And the connection here is it can be used for road construction, maintenance, and traffic operations, all of which can include transportation safety items. This is a grant program, the Local Roads Improvement Program, LRIP, from the state of Wisconsin. And this is for seriously deteriorating roads. So it's got to have a certain Paiser rating attached to it. On a scale of 1 through 10, it's got to be 1 very bad up to 6, somewhere of a moderate scale. Here, the state will pay up to a 50% cost share. Each county has a coordinator that oversees LRIP applications, and it just so happens that Milwaukee County's coordinator is Jeff, who's leading up this effort here. So if anyone's interested in this program, you can go right to Jeff. And what I did here for this image on the right-hand side is I just pulled, these are all the communities in Milwaukee County that have received LRIP grants. This was just, I believe, for a 1-year period here. And you can see the total project costs and then the matches, or I believe the state funding there. So a local example of this, Wauwatosa got an LRIP grants for Watertown Plank Road, I believe it's called, yes, to reduce speeds. They're adding bike and pedestrian changes as well to improve safety. Now I will jump over, I'll take a break, take a drink of water, and jump to federal grants. So for the federal budget, 3% of the federal budget goes to transportation. And this is what Angie was referring to earlier. There are a lot of different federal funding types. And I think curiously for me, as I've, learned this whole process over the past 20 years, of course, the federal government doesn't oftentimes give out the funding. Sometimes they do, only with this last bullet point, but there are other agencies that give out this federal funding, and they might have to follow federal rules or make sure you do, but they go through other agencies. So first, I'll cover the federal funding that goes through the southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. So all three of these funding categories. So the first is the Surface Transportation Program, or STP. So these projects have to happen on an arterial road as identified in the region's highway safety plan. And in this case, this is a screenshot. For STP money to be spent, it has to be on one of these roads shown on this map. So basically any line on this map. They may include safety improvements, these projects. And safety is actually also a scoring criterion if you apply for this federal funding through the RPC. A local example of this is the Village of Greendale reconstructed Grange Avenue. You can see before on the left back in 2023, and then after on the right for the current year. You can see they added, looks like a couple street lights. They also added bike lanes when they did this project. And you can see in the lower left how much money they got from STP and how much money they put in locally for that project. The second one administered by the RPC is the Transportation Alternatives Program. So this is usually more on the walking and the biking side of projects. This is an example from the Village of Bayside. They got a TAP grant to make changes to Brown Deer Road. And actually, when I grabbed this image from Street View, these are not the changes. This is just the regular striping crews, I'm sure, from the village going through and repainting the crosswalks and the left turn arrows. But you can see on the lower image there, they did their local matches, both on the preliminary engineering and construction side, and then they also got their TAP funding, both on the engineering side and the construction side. And then the third one, federal funding by RPC, is the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program, often referred to as CMAQ. This is a lesser amount. STP has the most money. TAP has a much lower amount of money. CMAQ has even a little lower amount of money, I believe. They do fund bike and ped and other safety-related projects that would improve air quality and reduce congestion. So an example of this program funding is the city of Greenfield. They were awarded CMAQ funding, a pretty big amount, $1 million, to put a trail along Root River Parkway. Okay, next category is federal funding through WisDOT. There's the Highway Safety Improvement Program and traffic safety grants. So the Highway Safety Improvement Program, I have to admit, I very much ignored this program at first when I was at the city of Minneapolis, because we were trying to solve a lot of bike fatalities and severe injuries. And I thought, oh, it's for highways. It's not for the roads that we're worried about. And I was very wrong, of course, because this is funding for local streets. So the purpose is to reduce those on all roads. It does not have to be on what we think of as a highway, like a state highway or a county highway. They do emphasize low-cost projects, and most of the projects that are currently HSIP projects are currently being received by the county or the city of Milwaukee in your local case here. So there is one project on that right-hand side. If you just go down here, they're all city of Milwaukee or Milwaukee County. Only the village of Whitefish Bay has applied and received for HSIP funding according to this database that I mined. So this is definitely an opportunity for your community to apply for safe transportation safety funding. This particular project right here, it's from the city of Milwaukee. I'll just highlight, I'm not sure why the dollar cost says 0 here, because over here, You can see if you look on the very lower left-hand image where the funding came from, the city of Milwaukee got 1.1 million in HSIP funding, and they contributed 100,000. And in this case, they're adding left turn lanes, signal mast arms with backplates because they currently just have pole-mounted traffic signals at this intersection, and they're also doing ADA ramp upgrades, all safety related. And then the other source of funding that comes through WisDOT, federal funding, is traffic safety grants and media campaigns. So they always have to be tied to the Wisconsin Highway Safety Plan, which is a document you can Google out there. Local governments and nonprofits are eligible for this source of funding, and you can see the types of projects that are funded down below. So this particular image on the right-hand side, this was for a pedestrian and bicycle safety enforcement grant category. And what I did here is these were statewide, a statewide list of grants, and I just highlighted the communities in Milwaukee County just to show folks that they are getting, there are 4 communities that received this funding with this particular round. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Angie. And Angie, I'm happy to continue to advance the slides unless you want me to hand it over.
Thanks, Sean. I actually thought you were going to cover this slide, but my bad. So an example of what Sean just was talking about, another program is the Recreational Trails Program, the RTP program, and this is for the development, rehabilitation, and maintenance of trails specifically. So Sean, could you go to the next slide? All right. The next, so as Sean has been talking, like these are, these are funds you can get from the state. These are funds you can get from the region. These are funds you can get from the county. Now I want to transition to funds you can get directly from the WisDOT. So Safe Streets and Roads for All is the one I was kind of mentioning, alluded to a little bit earlier. The foundation of the SS4A grant program is a safety action plan. You need one in place to continue applying for implementation, which is the majority of the funding available. The good news is Jeff and the county has done this for you. So you have your safety action plan in place already. You're eligible to apply for those big dollar implementation awards. But as you go forward and do that, I strongly encourage you, you can either, if you don't feel like you're ready to go for construction projects, or maybe you want to do a little more supplemental planning, maybe you want to do some of those quick builds I was talking about earlier and don't want to go to the permanent structure, you can certainly apply for supplemental planning and demonstration funds. You can also apply for those funds as part of your implementation application. I strongly encourage people to always chase that funds. You either can chase them by themselves as just supplemental planning and demonstration or as part of your implementation application. But these funds are not super competitive. The first 2 years of the grant program, not even all those funds were awarded. There wasn't enough people to even apply to get them. So your odds are very, very good for these type of activities. So definitely always include them in your application. And like I said, they also set you up well for later implementation dollars. Like if you do a demo project for a show, it can be successful with temporary measures. It sets you up really well for an implementation application later. Another thing, as earlier I was talking about how Safe Streets, the ones that are most likely to win awards are more systemic projects. They're taking place throughout the entire community. There's multiple projects in there. Another good way to get Safe Streets funding is partner with adjacent communities. We see this, we used to see this a lot with rural areas in particular, or kind of more suburban areas of small communities, partnering with others to put in an application. And so Safe Streets and Roads for All is authorized through 2026. My 2 cents of what's going to happen with that is that there'll be a continuing resolution. So history has shown us every time we have a highway safety authorization, We never can seem to pass one the second the other one expires. Usually the authorization gets continued for a few years. In that case, hopefully Safe Streets would be part of that continuing resolution. Good news is there's a bipartisan bill in Congress right now, and I'm going to really say that again, bipartisan bill in Congress to continue funding Safe Streets and Roads for All. But not only just continue Safe Streets and Roads for All, increase the funding from $1 billion a year to $5 billion a year. So call your congressman and say you want to keep seeing Safe Streets and Roads for All. Another DOT grant program that goes directly to localities is Build. In the past, this has been called Tiger. It's been called Raise. This isn't specifically a safety grant program, but it's a multi-modal, multidisciplinary program that goes to states. And safety is a common theme that usually shows up in Build grant awards. The minimum and maximum award size can vary greatly, but these tend to be big, big projects. And these are harder money to get. These are very, very competitive grants because it's a well-established grant program. It's been around a long time. This is meant to be kind of those, known problems and less on the systemic issues that I was talking about earlier. And these require a benefit cost analysis. Some other grant programs, Sean, could you advance? Some other grant programs that are outside of the DOT program, DOT and federal funding. There's a lot of other organizations that puts out money to do different type of activities. Maybe they're community engagement focused activities, maybe they're quick build projects, things like that. Some are storytelling. I would strongly encourage y'all to sign up for newsletters. And the great thing about so many of these newsletters from these organizations I have listed is when these grant funds become available, they put that in the title of their newsletter. Hey, grant funds are available. So you know to open that particular newsletter instead of just being like, oh, another newsletter and just deleting it. So most of these organizations I list are very good about in the newsletter title saying, hey, funding is available. Some of the ones I like is the AARP Community Challenge. They did a great award with a high senior population area, historically underserved neighborhood, and they did a temporary urban compact roundabout, aka a mini roundabout. Super cool. National Safety Council has a couple different grant programs they'll do. They actually are awarding federal funds that are administered through the National Safety Council, but they've done a lot of quick build projects with a heavy emphasis on community engagement. Smart Growth America, the Community Connectors program, storytellings is a big part of their application as well as the quick builds. Storytelling is really, really valuable. I think some of these grant programs up here are great complements to the infrastructure programs that Sean talked about extensively. And then Safe Routes Partnership, the Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day is another great grant program. And with that, we will move on to Q&A and peer exchange. Jeff, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah, Angie and Sean, really thanks for just that in-depth overview of all the potential solutions for how to fund our Vision Zero projects at a local level. We're just starting, as a region, as a county, to really get into this and, walking alongside municipal partners and, obviously WisDOT and Sewer Pack. We're all one team here, so let's get it going here with some peer exchange. We really want to ask some pointed questions, that will get us thinking and, help us to really, just communicate our needs, our questions to each other while we have the experts online here. I do want to point out, though, we also have, as an attendee, Milwaukee County's own grant specialist. Her name is Carla Fries, and she's just a fantastic resource. She really helped with guidance and with the narrative writing of our 2025 SS4A implementation grant application. So yeah, just we'll see, Carla, if there's any questions, that maybe you can help us out with, and definitely if you have any as well, just let us know. But let's just open it up here. Would really like to ask all of you, especially the municipal partners that are on this webinar, how are you funding any traffic safety changes in your community? Let's just start with that one. So, yeah, feel free to unmute, or if you'd rather, just type your answer in the chat.
Yeah, Jeff, I put it in the chat as well, but
Anyway,
TOSA implemented a vehicle registration fee, which I think some of the municipalities on here may also know. It's a $15 fee, but we use it specifically to address reckless driving and pavement repair. So we rewrote our neighborhood traffic calming program. A lot of communities have a program, but they require residents to be assessed to pay for it. We eliminated that. It is a city-funded program. We developed a set of rankings based on crashes, speeds, volumes, and it's been working out well so far. And every year we update the statistics and the new applications, and the highest ones are going to get funded, and the lowest ones will have to wait. So that's how we're doing it. One thing we like about that is it also takes away, if you have one neighborhood that can afford it versus one neighborhood that can't, it kind of puts them on an equal playing field. So you're really addressing the problems that um, are the most dangerous first.
excellent. Yeah, I mean, everyone, complains about a wheel tax, but I mean, really those funds are so pointed, to where they go, within our communities. They're really valuable. And even so, right, the Milwaukee area here, our overall vehicle registration fee, it's not that high compared with other cities and regions in the country. So, anyone else have any responses? How do you fund your traffic safety changes or challenges in your
This
community?
is this is Melinda from the city of West Dallas.
Yeah, yeah.
When we do road projects, we try to incorporate it into those. So while the road is special assessed, the improvements aren't in any addition to that. So if we want to put in a traffic circle at that time, it's no more or less because we set a fixed rate for the road. So whether we include it in a road project or not, um, doesn't impact the cost that the residents pay. But we've also incorporated a line item in our budget, and our common council is 100% behind it.
Right.
So we dedicate funds every year to different traffic calming projects or pedestrian safety projects. And this year we doubled it from 150 to $300,000 because we've been getting so many requests and doing so many studies to figure that out. So we just put a specific line item budget, and then there's no special assessment that goes with that. So that's one of
Excellent.
the ways West Dallas has been doing it.
I can't tell you how many times we've been hearing, in these last few years about the number of residents who want this traffic calming, right? They want it on not only their street, but on the major thoroughfares, that they use on a daily basis. And so, it's really clear, even more of our funding, hopefully can be allocated towards this. Let's move on. Are there any new funding opportunities that we discussed here on this webinar that you hope to pursue? Love to hear from you on this. What did you learn? And if we don't have any responses, I will call on someone.
Yeah, Jeff, I put it in the chat, but
Sure.
exploring more that DNR funding that was mentioned,
Yes.
that the DNR has some things for recreational trails. Um,
Trails, yep.
and then the build program. I want to look a little bit more into that.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Anyone else?
Hey, Jeff, if I can tack on a sort of an appendix question to your question there, thinking, for example, about the HSIP example that Sean shared earlier, with so few communities taking advantage of it, I'm curious from folks in the room who are maybe previously familiar with it, um, if there have been obstacles that have kept folks from pursuing funds through HSIP, or if it was lack of familiarity, or sort of if there are barriers around that one in particular, or any of these others that we sort of have noted. Hey, locals aren't really touching these.
Yeah, this is Mike from Tosa again. I always try to wait a few seconds, but I end up talking a lot. Uh, um, I think in the past, um, our community saw those and didn't really know exactly how to look at the crash data and determine countermeasures and things like that. I think some of the SS4A work we've done through the county with our phase three complete communities work has helped us identify our routes. We also now have two engineers on staff, myself and another person who's multimodal, who understand more some of the things that we can do and how the countermeasures work. And so I think that's why we're going to go after some. As interesting as it may be, the two we're looking at going to will actually require some coordination with other communities. So, uh, Milwaukee County Parks, we're going to need their coordination on one, and on another one's going to be the city of Milwaukee. So, um, we decided to start our first two with the challenges of interagency coordination. So that's a little daunting to think about. Maybe it's bigger than the molehill I make it to be.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much, Mike, for the insight.
Jeff, if you don't mind if I add something
Sure.
about HSIP, um, I don't have experience with it in Milwaukee County, to know those projects. Although, obviously I put that one up on the screen, that intersection in the city of Milwaukee. I'm sure there must have been a crash hotspot there. But the two examples I'm familiar with, one was in the city of Minneapolis, and the city applied for funding there to put in green conflict zone pavement markings. So the heated in type, that lasts longer. And they did it systemically across the community. They didn't
Wow.
necessarily have hot spots of crashes. Um, so I think they made that argument must have been MnDOT in that case, to get HSIP dollars there. And then similarly, also across the border, but in Iowa, the city of Cedar Rapids, which is about 120,000 people, they applied to the Iowa DOT to get HSIP funding to put in crosswalks at multiple locations around their community. Again, there were not hotspot issues there, but because they know systemically that's an issue, you can do it, especially on the highest risk streets where you see um, the most fatalities of your pedestrians and bicyclists. They may not have appeared in your community yet, but they might, because they kind of pop up. Um, they seem random, but they're more of a systemic issue on those high speed, wide, fast, high traffic sorts of streets. So that may be another way to approach it, so that the crash data is not quite so daunting for your community.
Great. Great. Appreciate that tip. And, just to kind of revisit, what obstacles are you encountering? I know we asked that about HSIP, but, and just overall, with obtaining funding, let's open it up here. What obstacles are out there? What are some challenges? Why aren't you, as a municipality, as an organization, as an entity, why aren't you, able, to go after as much funding as you would like.
Jeff, I think part of it is you got to find your 20% match, or in the case of HSIP, your 10% match. And so it's finding in your budget and ensuring that your decision makers understand what your problems are. I think
Absolutely.
that's an obstacle.
I mean, is it convincing to the decision makers and the electeds to go after this funding?
But yeah, I think it's also what are the priorities of the community at the time.
Sure.
You know, if you got other big things coming in that you've already committed to,
Yeah, absolutely.
scrounging up that 10 to 20% can be trouble. Other obstacles is knowing partners on the other side of the border, if you will. So
Mm.
um, definitely don't mean to put Milwaukee County parks on the spot, but they're not generally highway engineers, but their streets are treated by many people as streets, right? They are technically parkways owned by the
Parkways.
park.
Yeah.
Um, there's a number of signs, for example, on Menominee River Parkway, the tiger signs, you know, the object marker type signs that I've brought up a couple of times, and each time it gets cleared out of the GIS as they don't understand what it is, or I'll call somebody and they say, no problem, we take care of it. And they literally take the tiger sign, and I think they rotated 180 degrees. Well, in the end, the tiger sign's still pointing in the same direction when you rotate it
Oh,
180. So what's
yeah.
happening is the tiger signs are pointing people technically off the road instead of
Oh,
pointing people on the road. And so it's like little things like that that it's can be
sure.
frustrating. It's not towards funding, but
Yeah. I would also think that staffing is, obviously an issue. There's not enough capacity these days, or the expertise to, sit down and, just fill out these extensive applications, and deliver, all the narrative, all the letters of support and other documentation that some of these programs require. And so that is why I'd like to turn actually to Carla as we ask, do you have any other tips for villages or cities? Carla, just from the county perspective, and I mean all the grants that you're involved in. I mean, just what are some tips you could offer?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me today. I think, everyone's sort of hitting it on the spot of, you need the match, you need the time, where's the capacity? And I will say that to that end, a lot of these grants that are grant opportunities that are discussed today are annual, right? So they come out every year or biannual. So if you don't have time now to do it, then you can take that time to plan accordingly, right? There's times where I've written a grant in a week, 2 weeks, or 6 months, right? Depending on who you're working with. Like me, as like Jeff said, I support all grant service areas within the county, right? So a sheriff's grant to Jeff's grants to, health and human services. So I am not the content expert, right? But I know enough in grants to make me dangerous and to help build Jeff's vision, the municipality's vision, collaboration into hopefully a strong grant application to submit. So like Angie said and everyone else said, so plan ahead. You don't have to submit this year if you're not ready, right? You want to submit a strong application, whether you're doing it on your own or if you're collaborating. And Angie said too, I think a lot of times we see that collaboration sort of gets you a little extra bonus points, right? They want to see the buildup between different municipalities, counties, communicate with the state, tips of the trade. That gives you time to build out your match. And like Jeff said too, and Angie, I think everyone said there's that opportunity for in-kind match, right? So if you're working with the partner, then you can share the love and share the match, right? So there's a lot of match that we use in-kind match a lot, whether it's your fiscal staff who might have 5% I mean, we'll nickel and dime, if it's 10% of your supervisor, if it's 10% of your fiscal, volunteer time can be counted as well, as long as they're not matched. If I'm 100% FTE, as long as I'm not 110 somewhere else, I'm good and you can use me as an in-kind match. But yeah, plan ahead. Another thing too, and build is one of them. Not a lot of federal grants when you submit, and if you're not awarded, they'll actually give you feedback and they'll go through your application and say your strengths of the application and the weaknesses. That is a huge, huge, huge tool to have to prepare your next application. So it would stink to do all that time and energy and submit that grant, but if you don't get it, there are benefits to at least getting the feedback, so then you can turn it around next year and submit again. I've done that a lot. I mean, I have a winning record, but those when you do not get those, you use that feedback and submit again, which we did on a separate grant. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything else specific or questions that you may have. As Angie said too, submit or subscribe to anything and everything. Grants.gov, Federal Register, that ARP Community Challenge that I was going to bring up. I think Michael May has another tip on the chat. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so what we've done with some of our grants is if you call up the DOT and ask for a copy of the applications, they will not share it with you. They'll tell you to go to the local municipality, but the local municipality can definitely share it with you. So if there are certain things you're interested in doing, look at the past awardees, contact the communities, and they're almost always willing to share with you. So in fact, with an opens records request, they're probably required to, but we're all in the same boat. I think people are willing to share. So that was another tip I had.
Huge tip.
Yeah, yeah, we've done that, right, Carla?
Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Definitely. Okay, so thanks for that. Appreciate it. And just a final one here. I mean, how can we, at the county, how can we support your pursuit of safety funding? That's why we're here. To really bring us all along. Get us on the same page. Definitely pointing and aligned to Vision Zero by 2037. And so how can we help in that mission for you?
Okay, I counted to 10. I'm curious to know, Carla, you do the grant writing. Is that correct? From
I
Milwaukee
work
County?
with the content expert. So Jeff, the one we just submitted, I worked with Jeff.
Okay. So are there ways that the county can help us with the grant writing
Group,
or
yeah.
reviewing our grant applications, or like how does that work?
I mean, I say yes to everything. So that's my a lot of times we'll partner with any grants that we partner on. It's a team effort, right? So we're in it. I work in shared drive and we just share our we share the document and work together to have a strong application. So absolutely, again, like my job is to ask the right questions, to pull the information, and ensure that all the questions are being asked. And then it also as well, because I'm not in the business of that, like I act as a peer reviewer as well, right? So anything you're submitting to the feds or to the state or private, philanthropic, whoever, they have peer reviewers who are reading your application. So that's me as well, right? I act as that sort of first external eye of like, if I don't get it, they're not going to get it. But absolutely, through partnership, we work together to get it done. Writing, budget, review, the A to Z of grants.
Yeah. And I would say, Mike, if it's a city application, feel free to send it over and, if and when appropriate, I'll loop in our expert here, Carla. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Hey, Sazia, I don't know if we covered everything that was in our chat, but let's check real quick.
I think we did. There might have been one question from Michael about HSIP, but Michael, maybe if you want to just hop on and say if you had any questions unanswered.
I think I got it answered. I think up by Milwaukee Lutheran High School, there's sidewalk directly in front of the high school, but it doesn't connect over to 92nd Street, where a lot of those kids are taking the bus. It doesn't connect west, where there's some Milwaukee County land. Um, and so we're seeing pedestrians walking in the sidewalk or on the street. Had a couple of pedestrians struck, um, but they're not technically severe injury or fatalities. Can HSIP be used to complete that sidewalk network to the transit side was the question I had. But it sounds like it would. It depends.
Yeah, and we can definitely get back to you on that, Mike, too. I can look up the grant application. For what it's worth, because I know Jeff, you mentioned sometimes the grant applications can be a little unwieldy from what I've seen of HSIP applications, but I don't know. I'll look at the Wisconsin form. Sometimes they are on the lighter side, the HSIP applications. Maybe that's not true in Wisconsin. Maybe that's what's discouraging people, but um, sometimes they can be a little easier. So I'll take a look at that. Email you afterward, Mike.
Yeah,
Appreciate
and I
that.
will for that question too, also always think outside of the box, right? So it might not be a DOT or a state, it might be a school grant, like a DPI grant or a Department of Ed grant if you're talking about a school, right? So if it's the school side that needs connection, I can look into that too to see if we can do, it might be a Department of Ed grant that would do like a infrastructure kind of grant or that kind of stuff. So might be from a different lens, right?
Right.
This is Ryan Hole with SewerPack.
Right.
I commented that that project would certainly be eligible for TAP funds, particularly like the Safe Routes to School sort of element.
Excellent.
Thanks, Ryan. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. And a question for Angie, just the clarification of that 5 billion that was reproposed. Is it 1 billion per year, but then the the balance between planning and demonstration versus implementation has changed? Do you have any other insight on that?
Yes. So I guess the first thing I would say, it's a proposal. And so there's a caution that it's only a proposal. It is at $5 billion annually, whereas before it was only $1 billion annually. And absolutely right that it does shift the ratios. One of the kind of the complaints I heard most about Safe Streets as Roads for All is 40% was required to be set aside for planning and demo, and 60% to implementation. It will shift that balance to 80% being implementation and then 20% being planning and demo in the future. But again, just a caution, a caveat. It is just a proposal, but it would be incredible if this goes through. I've watched some of the reauthorization hearings, not all of them. And, as much as we see our electeds kind of arguing in a lot of these, the one universal thing I've heard in those reauthorizations is everyone loves safe streets. It's a super, like, you guys, we've heard all these concerns come up today about, it's hard doing these grant programs. Like the planning and demonstration application for safe streets is a one-page narrative, 1.5 pages if you're asking for more than $1 million. So safe streets is a much lower burden application process, and it's been universally loved. And I think that's why we're seeing bipartisan proposals to continue it. But it hasn't passed yet.
Yeah, excellent. That is really great news. And yeah, let's advocate for that, however we can in our roles. So I do want to know, I do see Milwaukee County's Former grant expert, now has gone on to even bigger and better things. But Nikki Todd, just want to say thanks for all of your work in the early days of our Complete Communities project. We wouldn't have this project as a whole, without you. So, really appreciate all your help on the TAP grant and our SS4A planning grant way
Well,
back
I have to say,
a couple
honestly,
years ago. Yeah.
you have been an exceptional project manager for the past 3+ years through so many phases, through so many developments with so many partners. So, yeah, anything we can all do to support, of course, the municipalities and you and DOT, we are happy to do.
Appreciate you. So, here we are, we're on the precipice of Vision Zero by 2037. We are working as a county and all of you, in your own jurisdictions and through your organizations, on, eliminating fatalities and serious injuries on our streets. And that has to be our goal. That has to be our mission, why we exist in these roles. We wear a lot of hats, but and by far this is the most important. So, let's keep at it. All right. Keep in touch with us here at the county DOT. We really want to be, a partner with you however we can. So, just as we wrap up, I definitely want to thank, our consultants here at Tool Design. They've been instrumental, along with the others at WSP and Tool and Muse, and all the sub consultants as well. So, if there aren't any other questions, let me do one more quick check. I think we're clear. So, we'll give you back a few minutes. Any other comments from our experts? Thumbs up or no? If not, Sean, you good? Yeah.
Yep, I'm
Angie?
good. Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks, Jeff. Great job.
Tarek, you're good?
I'm feeling good. We'll be sharing out a recording of this later on, I believe. So if there's
Absolutely.
something that you missed that you need to take a second look at, you'll have the chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And stay tuned. Each of our municipal safety action plans are coming soon. I'm seeing all the drafts. They look amazing. So, stay tuned. We'll give you more details on that as they come out. Okay. Have a great day. And yeah, let's be safe. All right. Take care.